Hi, and welcome to Rule of Carnage. This is a YouTube channel, a podcast, a place where myself, Glenn Ford, a games designer and developer, has conversations with this guy, Mike Hutchinson, also a games designer developer, about designing, hopefully, better miniatures games. So what's popped up on Mike's mind this week is, does the world need your game? Do we need more miniatures games? Do we need maybe specifically the miniatures game, maybe that each of us are working on, maybe that you're working on? Is there a law of diminishing returns on some of these subjects? Is there too much overlap, too much repetition, too much regurgitation? And how can you make your game something that's worth adding into the mix, into the pantheon of giants that have come before? And I think this is something that I think probably every designer has to think about, or should think about at some point, because
Wakes up screaming in the middle of the night, sweating about.
there are a lot of games out there. Like, sometimes, I when this conversation comes up, I generally go to War Game Vault and do a
Mm.
general search of just land-based games War Games Vault has available for free, and the number is terrifying and and depressing, and and the games keep getting made and keep getting put out there. And a good deal of them have a lot of overlap, not just in subject, but mechanics and systems, and sometimes in everything, in every part.
Mm.
So why do we keep making new ones? What drives us to do so? What motivates us? I mean, I've got some pretty strong opinions. Mike, what?
Well, so I mean, this is yes. The reason this topic is in my mind is for a few reasons, but the most pressing one being that I am let's say between projects at the moment. Like I don't have a pressing deadline for a game project right now, and so I've been working and tinkering with a few things. I had a couple of productive conversations with people um, over the last couple of weeks, and some game ideas popped into my head. And as I tend to do, like I get elbows deep in a sort of hastily sketched out initial design whilst whilst the frenzy has taken me. And then I guess a couple times this week I sort of sat back and well, so one was I was working on a game of a kind of which there are plenty in a genre of which there are plenty already, and I started watching YouTube videos of other people's games being played because I'd gotten to a certain point and I was thinking, oh, I wonder how much I'm regurgitating things that are just already obviously there. And it really just got me thinking about, okay, if I'm going to make this type of genre of game, why? Like, what am I going to say that hasn't been said before? Or what is it about my mechanics which are so substantially better that, it fires another game which is already well played and has a player base? And yeah, basically like just the sort of existential question of should I even be writing these? Like, why am I making more of them? And I'm, very minded to make a great number of these things, and each of them, you know, each of them I want to make to a certain level of a standard. But why? Like, why all these games, and why all the other ones that are being released? And yeah, as you say, like as you're approaching a project, like having this question is this question should be forming in the conscientious game designer's mind. And often I've had a completely reasonable answer to it. And perhaps these games, because they were like skirmish games with 28mm miniatures, like that's not a thing that I have made that many of because that's a very dense market. And so this question bubbled up even more brightly in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's like not to sort of get too highfalutin about what it is that we're doing.
Oh, do.
People continue to write novels, and they continue to paint paintings, and they continue to make films, and we've been doing a lot of those things for quite some time, and we've collectively made rather a lot of all of those things.
Hmm.
And I think it's worthwhile that people continue to write books and to paint paintings, and so I think it must be achievable that it is worthwhile continue making games. And I really do think that games are a really important like art form in many ways. And I think they don't often get enough acknowledgement. And I think specifically for me, and this is something that I will talk about at some length, that I really don't think miniatures games have like done all the things they can do. I really think that they have sort of limited themselves sometimes. Like definitely they've limited themselves in subject, uh,
Mm.
for like a huge percentage of what they've done, and like daring to touch upon subjects other than battering somebody to death within a miniatures game is so sort of avant-garde and extreme and weird, that people don't react brilliantly to it. And the very fact that even touching those subjects is like pure madness to me says, yeah, there's definitely some space here still to keep creating in this
Yeah,
area.
definitely.
Sort of,
Although having said that, like, or even within those constraints, like, there are a lot of action movies with chase sequences and gunfights,
mm,
and it continues to be worth people's time making more action movies with car chases and gunfights. Um,
yeah,
and clearly people find either commercial reasons to do so or artistic reasons to do so, or hopefully both.
mm,
Um, and there it almost feels like, for me, like the cinematography, the script writing, like those are places where artists are trying to find and express their voice. And
mm.
here, as game designers, we're trying to do the same thing, which is like cars can crash into each other, guns can be shot at people in or out of cover, but they can be done in different ways, which um, which have a voice, and which people can get excited about. Different people can get differently excited about.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because like we played and I popped up a review of Torch and Shield, a very splendid game that will probably be on Kickstarter when this video goes up. And so it's a dwarves delving into a dungeon sort of game. And someone popped up in the comments to the review saying this looks great, but I'm literally in the middle of designing a dungeon delving dwarves going into a dungeon. I'm basically trying to design this game right now, and I have been for a while. And this one looks really good. What do I do? And it's like there's even then with a subject that niche, there's definitely more than one way to approach it, and there's more than one way to sort of approach it in theme and tone, and as well as mechanically and all those sorts of things. So there's ways of redoing this. Torch and Shield approaches it in a slightly not horror end of things, but like a very much sort of there's these terrible monsters and the darkness is coming, and you're running out of time and you're getting pulled off and killed. And there's totally a way to do it in a much more sort of Conan bombastic. What is happening is that dwarves are going down there and just punting goblins into walls and laughing at the feebleness of the other dwellers, and easily reclaiming their holds because they're so boss. And those two things would totally work very happily, in different ways. I think like because I've been thinking about this a little bit, sort of slightly tangentially recently. I've been thinking about like people often say, you to design a game for yourself or design the game that you want to play. Um, and my feeling about that sometimes is like there's a pretty short limit on like the games you want to play, and particularly if the first thing you design is the game you most want to play in the whole world of all games ever, and then you've made it, then like anything you do after that is presumably a step down in how much you want to play it or how
No
interested
way,
you are
man.
in it.
No, I understand. I understand the logic there, but I don't think I don't. My human brain does not operate in that way.
Well, I think sometimes my slightly tangential sort of take on that is sometimes I know that I'm designing the game I want to design, um a lot,
Right,
rather than games
right.
that I want to play, or the the questions that sometimes drive me in design are specific things that excite me that aren't inherently I just want to play this thing or I just want to have this thing exist. Sometimes it's I want to answer this question or that question. I want to know.
I almost feel like that is to a degree like something that felt to me like a maybe a an evolution or a maturity in my own design approach, which is I came at Gaslands, for example, thinking I want to, this is the game that I want to play. But through the process, realized that actually the game I was designing had to have a set of boundaries and a set of design principles and needed to eject some things. And, maybe I would prefer if a certain extra bit of fluff was stuck in there, but the game is better and cleaner and crisper and more approachable if you take those things out. And so I don't know, like I still basically believe the tenet of, make art, make games, make music for yourself first, because otherwise, because you're the first person that's going to enjoy it, so you might as well be enjoying yourself. But I also think that particularly when it comes to games where they can't be everything to everyone, but they also have to be processed by a person on the other end who's going to have to do something quite elaborate with them to make them work. Like you do have to make compromises, and those compromises have to be in line with what you want out of a particular thing. So even if it's the game that you always wanted to play, you're going to have to go on a journey to discover what that even means. And maybe it is all those things that you put in. You decide that you do want that extra chrome because screw it. This is the game that I want to make, and that's fine if that is what you want to do. But
Yeah, I think sometimes when I hear designers quite often say like, I was playing a game and it wasn't the game I wanted, and the game I wanted wasn't out there, and so I made it.
yeah,
And if but then a lot of like I come across a lot of designers who say that, and what they've done is more or less house ruled an existing game to be the version that they want rather than a necessarily better game, and then like reskinned it and put it out there. And it's like that doesn't need, in my opinion, doesn't really need to exist. Or they've taken like made a Frankenstein's monster out of like three different games, and you can totally spot the entire like chunk that's been dropped in wholesale from, well, that's 30% this and 30% that and 30% that.
right.
You know, that
Whereas,
was,
like, I can definitely point at Gaslands and say that was like, evil game CEO Mike going, there is a gap in the market. Like, there is a place that has not been filled for many years by a recent new game product. It is, post-apocalyptic car combat that hasn't come up very often, and it hasn't really been done with toy cars. Let's go and do the best one of those possible, as opposed to Hobgoblin, which is genuinely just like 12-year-old Mike going, this is the best and only way to play like square-based fantasy, and this is just everything that I want and nothing that I don't want.
yeah, and I think that this sort of bleeds into a little bit like what we might talk about in a minute or two is like, for me, some of the answer to what drives designers is often the things that attracts them to various games. Like, I know I'm very attracted to a game like by certain mechanical hooks.
Mm.
A game will like, I need to look at the paragraph on the back of the book and it says I do this weird thing, like mechanically speaking, or achieve this sort of interesting like emotional effect or experience through my mechanics. And they're like, okay, you make that claim, now I want to see that paid out. That's what attracts me to a game. And in reverse, what attracts me to writing a game is, oh, okay, here's an interesting mechanical thing that feels like it could support a game, or here's like an emotion or experience or event that I don't think exists in games. Can I build the framework to support that? But equally, I think there are people who are attracted to games by the setting, the theme, the genre in a way that I know I'm not really. I don't think I've ever really been attracted to a game like more than 20% by virtue of the
I
setting.
mean, I think that's
Um,
that's one of the things that I struggle with is like the idea that like I want to make a cowboy game, so let's make a cowboy game and I'll make the best cowboy game I can, or like I want to make a you know I want to make a science fiction skirmish game, you know, a sort of aliens skirmish game. Like, let's make the best one of those. Like, that doesn't get my design imagination going. Like, what gets my design imagination going is like, okay, so the scene in Alien where they're like sneaking through the corridors and they have access to the scanner, but they only have a limited amount of ammunition and they're being picked off like backwards and forwards. Like, okay, amazing. Now I can see a game. You know, Space Hulk did it. It was brilliant. But like
Yeah.
that sort of like cinematic image, like what's the exactly as you say there, like what's the feeling I want to evoke? What's the story that I want to tell? What's the thing that is going to be, you know, placed into the players' hearts and minds in a way that I haven't seen achieved successfully using rules and dice alchemy.
Yeah, it's like personally, I don't want to make a horror game, but I would like to make a game that is scary or feel has a horror feel to it. It's like the theme of horror, I don't think is necessarily to me super interesting because it's like it's a set of skirmish things with some like themed rules to it. That's fine, but it's not going to drive me to design a whole game. But can I design a game that makes you feel like someone's like stood just behind you, like and you want to turn around and check that there's someone there, that is a question that's interesting to me.
I
And
think I think another sorry, you know, you finish.
no, like, and I just want to say, it's like, and that is by no means a judgment upon like I want to design a cowboy game or a horror game or whatever else, but it's just you have to accept what drives you. I think as a designer, you know, and it's fine whatever drives you, but that just isn't what happens to spark my interest in designing games.
Yeah, and I suppose like where you begin and what you come out with are completely unrelated in many regards. I guess one thing that occurs to me listening to that is uh in like when you're making software, whether that's like boring utility software or exciting video game software, like starting with a list of features that you think are interesting is often a way of creating a very banal piece of like output. So if you're sort of saying, okay, well, it needs to have like a campaign system with injuries and it needs to have a D12 system, and you know, I want there to be a variable um, activation order or something, like that is a collection of things that maybe haven't appeared in a game in that exact intersection, but like who cares, like it's not, that is no guarantee that this game is going to be interesting. It might be unique, but it feels like, does the world need my game? Well, if you're just selling me four mechanics that haven't been combined before, then like probably not.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I think that's a a really good point there to sort of to pin down on that.
Why, thank you.
A unique, you know, something being unique is not the same as something being interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something being non-unique is almost certainly, you know, not the same as it being interesting. But just yeah, but
Maybe, but even then, like, you know,
yeah, but
like all of the things in Hobgoblin that are truly unique, yeah, but like, you know, I feel like I've made something that's worth your time in its aggregate uh like design.
yeah, no, absolutely. But but I think, and I think this is something we've sort of spoken about before. It's about the idea and the thing that
The idea.
idea and the thing that sort of drives it. You know, there needs to be something at the heart of the game because it's like at various points we've gone back and forth to each other with various designs, and you put a design down and the person plays it, and then you basically go, is there anything there? And
Mm.
hopefully you find somebody you trust to sort of answer that question, because it's that just, yeah, there is something there, or no, there's not, you know. And it is tragic how many fully finished, fully realized games I see, and you know, people are looking for feedback, and I look at it, and the honest answer is there just doesn't happen to be anything there. This is a functioning game. This looks to actually be a more or less unique game, or at least I can't point to a specific thing and say it's basically this or like these three things smashed together. But there still happens to be nothing there. There still happens to be no soul to it or no spark to it. And I
And
think that,
it's weird because like you could sort of imagine saying that about like, you know, a Netflix sort of crime thriller series, and you're like, did you enjoy that generic crime thriller series? And you're like, yeah, it was fine. It consumed some hours of my life. Like I didn't have to work hard. It was it was fine. Like, would I recommend it to friends? Probably not, but it was fine. Whereas in this interactive medium, you're asking so much from players that it feels like, um, because it's such a time because it's such a time investment, and because it's such a kind of product rich, it's a game rich environment, like, you can't necessarily get away with the sort of mediocrity that perhaps some other like entertainment art forms are actually permitted to get away with.
Also, it is worth bearing in mind the huge like mainstream nature of those other art forms
That's right.
and
Yeah, yeah.
the massive amounts of money that are in them. I think I told you once I read an interview from the guy who, to the American viewers who aren't aware, there's a fifth channel in British terrestrial TV. We've got a whole five, and the fifth one is not popular. And I remember reading an interview with the guy who booked shows for that channel, and he said, "I used to book like big movies, big new movies. They cost a lot of money, and we got terrible viewing figures for them. And then I just started booking absolute garbage, like the worst sort of daytime baloney movies, and they get much better viewing figures for us because people don't want to watch our channel. They want our channel to just exist over there and for them to not have to in any way engage with it." And it's like, that's fine because they've got massive amounts of money going backwards and forwards and they've got millions of people available in their audience. If you're designing tabletop miniatures games, A, you ain't going to be putting another wing on the mansion with the payout that you get from it, and B, you are targeting a niche bunch of people. um and so, it's like GW, can serve up the mass market, the most mass market thing that we have within this area. And
Mm.
and they're the only ones that can get away with that. No, you cannot attempt to do that as well. You've got to actually find a person and get that person and have them actually focus on your thing, and care about it and love it. And you've got to do it because you really care about, doing that for them. You can't be doing it because, you just want money. Because if so, there's a lot of better jobs that you could be signing
So
up for.
one other answer to this question of like, why would I write another one of these games when something that, you know on its surface has the same subtitle? Why would I write another one of those games that could have the same subtitle? I was thinking about this in the context of video games and why there are so many indie video games. And like, if you pick a dense, a packed subgenre like, roguelike dungeon things, like, why would anyone make another roguelike dungeon thing? And I guess one of the places that my head was going, although maybe doesn't apply to that subgenre, is like, well, the reason that I'm interested in playing another Fallout game or another, fighting game is that the technology is advancing. And so I'm getting better graphics or I'm getting new gameplay ideas. Like, playing Doom 2016, which applies all these new exciting ideas in a game design way to improve on something that was wonderful 20 years ago. And it also does a load of visual things. Like, technology is moving forward, the games design conversation is moving forward. Like, new things are conceptually available, and new things are like technologically available. And I use the word technology in a games design way to mean like new kind of mechanics and affordances have been revealed to us that mean that, we've got a slightly bigger palette than we did. I talk about this, we bollock on about Malifaux a lot. Like, I describe my interface with Malifaux as being one of like an excitement and a joy that's like, oh crap, this has pushed the technology of skirmish games forward in my mind. Like, I have new things available to me that I didn't realize were available to me. And so, to a degree, like, one of the answers is, well, why does Gaslands exist when Car Wars was brilliant in its first edition? Well, like, Car Wars only had what it had available in terms of technology, and where the conversation was at, like in the late 70s. And there's space for innovation and new kind of restatements of things, but using better in inverted commas graphics. And I think that is to a degree quite true. Like, even on the sort of decade horizon, like looking at the last major, insert, fantasy skirmish game with a campaign system, or post-apocalyptic skirmish game with a campaign system, or warband sized World War II thing. Like all of these things, they were great. They came out. They've got big fan bases. If they're still being played now, they probably were big and have fan bases. But like, they'll be of their time, and maybe they've evolved as they've gone through editions. But there's new technology, there's new conversations, there's new things to apply, and so maybe, I mean, that's to a degree saying like, well, if your game is just doing another one of those, then it better have moved the conversation forward. And I suppose I believe that. I don't think everyone else necessarily believes that. I believe that. I get quite sniffy with new games that come out that look the same as old games that I've already seen, and I don't feel that they're pushing the game mechanics conversation forward. But I've also had other people like slap me down when I've criticized games for that, for saying, yeah, but like the whole package is extremely easy to consume. It's like the most sort of user friendly, easy to get into, like you just get it on the table and you go. And like that's another form of advancement and kind of conversation pushing, is like, well, how do we make like my game is going to be considerably smoother on the palette. It's just going to be easy to get going, and you won't find it lumpy at the table.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally one of my main opinions about this sort of thing is, you know, just because you're designing a game doesn't mean that anybody else is ever going to see it. If you want to design a game, design a game. You know what? One thing I've learned is that probably you won't finish it. A lot of people start designing games and don't actually finish them. So just have a go, just do it. It's not it's not going to kill anybody either way. Then when it comes to releasing it and putting it out into the world and selling it to other people, then there might be other questions as to whether it was worth doing it. But I think it's always worthwhile creating things and learning and amusing yourself, if nothing else. I mean, by goodness, if there's any channel that suggests that yes, you should go design a miniatures game immediately, it should be this one. Uh, I think we'll sort of move along from this chunk of this conversation. We might sort of continue in related form in a minute, but
And
yeah,
by minutes there, Glenn means in a subsequent week.
absolutely, yes. The fact that we'll be dressed entirely the same should in no way
Ruining the magic of cinema.
this is cinema.
I might change my t-shirt just to throw everyone off.
I definitely am not going to. Yeah, you should design games. You should make things. You should create something. It's good for your soul, and it's good for the world. And you know what? If you are designing something, you should tell us about it. That's what the comment section is for, along with just generally saying to us how splendid we are and how happy you are that we made this video. And also, it's for punching like and subscribe buttons. So go and do those things now. When you're down there, you might notice a link over to our Discord. Swing by there, and there is a whole bunch of people who think that it is a good idea to design a new and better miniatures game, because they're all doing it, and you can have lovely conversations with them about their games and your games. And one of the good reasons to design a new game is to get involved in a wonderful community of like-minded people, and we want to support that. Yeah, you can come by there and chat to people. All that done, though, I think it'll be it for this conversation from us. So it'll be a thank you and goodbye. So thank you and goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.